You know, you've called me with some really stupid ideas through the years, but this may yeah. First of all, why are you calling with Halloween costume ideas in May? And secondly, Mo Rogan is probably the stupidest. Yeah, nobody knows who the fucking Three Stooges are at this, or cares. And you want to mix Mo from the Three Stooges and Joe Rogan. No, it's stupid. Like four people will get it. And you know, and when they get it, they're going to be like, yeah, that wasn't actually that funny. Anyway, I have to go. I got a guy here. He's working on the thing. All right, yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's hilarious. Yeah, not as good as your Garth Vader, Garth Brooks, Darth Vader thing from 2003. But anyway, yeah, thanks. Good to see you. Jesus. They say the first record you hear by an artist is ends up being your favorite one by that artist. This happened to me with the Bad Brains with Rock for Light. Which I like a lot better than the first cassette, the self-titled cassette, which I, understand is an important and amazing piece of music. But Rock for Light was the first one that I heard. And, but that didn't happen with other bands. Like the Dead Kennedys, the first thing I heard by them was the EP with In God We Trust, which is good, but it's kind of like it's not as good as the LPs like Fresh Fruit and Plastic Surgery Disasters. But with the Misfits, Earth AD was the first record I heard by them. And the original one, which is the 9-song American version, which is 14 minutes and 39 seconds long, has the songs Earth AD, Queen Wasp, Devil Lock, Death Comes Ripping, Green Hell. I don't know why I'm counting like this, like I'm actually fucking doing it. Wolf's Blood, Demonomania, Blood Feast, and Hellhound. CD pressings of this added Die Die My Darling and We Bite at the end of this. And then the streaming now has the studio version of Mommy Can I Go Out and Kill Tonight that I think they recorded at the same sessions as Earth AD. But Die Die My Darling, which is, arguably one of the best Misfits songs, but that might actually be the best Misfits song. It's a great song, right? But it doesn't fit on what's happening on this record, which is, we're going to get into that in a minute here. And then We Bite, which is, that's a good song too, but it just doesn't fit on here. But we're going to talk about my this German version of this record, which has Wolf's Blood on the cover and Earth AD on the back. And so this one has Die Die My Darling and We Bite on it. And this is reportedly the very first pressing of this record, which doesn't really make sense to me because it has those two songs in the end. So, the timing of all the Misfits recordings and when stuff was released and that kind of thing is very confusing. So I'm not going to get into that kind of thing so we'll just talk about the record. But this particular version of this is on this label called Aggressive Rock Productions, and I had a bunch of stuff on this record. I think I found a JPEG of this inner sleeve, but I had the Misfits Evil Live. I had that Aggressive Rock Productions version of that. I still have government issued Joyride. I have a version of that. I had the Angry Simone's record on this label. Where the Meat Men and You Suck. They did the Necros, Conquest for Death. A lot of compilations. The Angry Simone's. But anyway, I don't know what the deal was with this record, with this label, but apparently they, got licenses to do German versions of these records. And, they had a lot of cool stuff. But Newbury Comics always had these. So I always bought them if I saw these versions. And this is the same version I bought back then. But I did have an original of Earth AD, the original one with the purple cover that I'm talking about here with the 9 songs. But that's long gone, as well as my 7 inches that I had, because I heard this record first from my friend Peter Biebergall, who introduced me to punk and all that kind of music, which I've talked about on here plenty of times. So in 1984, him and I started hanging out. We would go to his house and listen to all this music. But everything from, Minor Threat to Rudimentary Peni, and then this record. With the original cover, not this reverse version I have. But it was scary to me. Same with that band Rudimentary Peni, who were like really creepy. They had like really just crazy. If you don't know that band, check them out. It's good stuff. Anyway, so I hadn't heard any Misfits music at all up to this point. So this was the first thing I heard by them. So you can imagine, when I then went back and heard, Hollywood Babylon and Where Eagles Dare and Hybrid Moments and that kind of stuff. And people like to call this record a metal record, which there is a lot of metallic stuff on here. But, I call it I compare it mostly to Discharge. It drives like Discharge. It knocks every fucking thing in the way, out of the fucking way, just like Discharge. But also, this music sounds like it was recorded in like the deepest, darkest depths of hell. Just the sound quality of it is really creepy and just like, I don't know, it's a weird sounding record. And then, with this record, there's no pictures of the band on it. There was no lyrics. And, I quickly got Walk Among Us after this. So that had those, pictures of them on the back with their, it was had the pictures of their faces on the back of the record. Then the inner sleeve, I think, had a collage of pictures in there as well. It's another one that just I'd sold at one point. All these Misfits records. I kept this one because it is my favorite one, which we'll get into at some point here. But I kind of wish I still had that original Walk Among Us or whatever, third pressing or whatever the hell I had for a long time. But when I finally saw those pictures of them on there, and then, seeing pictures of them in fanzines, and, there was pictures of them from when they played the Channel with Gangrene, which is, there's a famous, there's a lot of videos of that show on YouTube that you can find. But yeah, so this record opens with the title track Earth AD, which is just this feedback all of a sudden just shows up, and then you just hear someone screaming 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this evil guitar riff comes in with these pounding drums, and then you're off for the best 14 minutes of your life. Or 22 minutes, or, with this other version that I have here. That's got the other 2 songs. Or 25 when you have the one with Mommy, Can I Go and Kill Tonight? And, the thing about this song and throughout the record are all the buried backing vocals, guttural screams, just like these weird backward sounding voices. They're like sort of buried in there. And some of them, sound to me like what it, would sound like in hell. So, it's just, yeah. But like the beginning of the Slayer Hell Awaits album, when you hear all those, like what it sounds like as demons or something. But that sounds like this throughout the whole record. There's just these underlying, listen to this record on headphones and you'll hear all that stuff sort of come alive, and, it's creepy because some of it's in just one speaker. But some of it are so buried and squished. It's got like a weird muffled sound to them. So yeah, it's a weird sounding record for sure. This Earth AD eventually collapses into Queen Wasp, which is another driving song with the chorus that has some pretty chugging guitar lines. So right away you're like, oh, these guys are getting pretty metal. And in this record also, not famously, but, in my circle of friends, and I've heard other people talk about this as well, is not knowing the lyrics to a lot of these songs for many years. So a lot of times we had our own versions of the lyrics to these songs, which were amusing to us. I don't know. I literally had a document that had them all in, that had all these songs in it at one point, but it's since disappeared, and probably for the better. So after Queen Wasp, the production on this record too is questioned, by a lot of people. It's recorded by Spot, who at this point, he was the SST guy, and he had recorded Black Flag, The Descendants, Saint Vitus, Husker Du, the Minute, anyone on SST, the Descendants, and they did this record in one night. So there's an interview with Jerry Only in Metal Hammer magazine from 2008. I'm going to read some stuff from. And he says, "We did it right after a show at the Santa Monica Civic Center in December of 1982, which featured the Misfits and a Black Flag reunion. We recorded all the music for that album right from midnight to 6 a.m, complete. Glenn slept through the entire recording session, but I woke him up long enough for him to say, 'Mommy, can I go out and kill tonight?' to start off the song of that title. The rest of us kick in right after he says that line, so we needed it down on tape for the proper timing." Really? Glenn did do some vocal overdubs in July 1983, but in reality, the whole album was done during that one session. That's pretty crazy. And, and that's probably the way it sounds the way it does. And it's charming. I don't know, it's not charming, but it just has this feel to it. There's no scenario with this, you would imagine this song was recorded at noon, and like in the middle of it, they were like, let's go get some, Cobb salads, and then we'll come back and, let's do a Demonomania for the 5th time. But let's, go out first and get lunch and, hit Starbucks. There's Starbucks in 1982 in wherever the fuck they did this. Oh, in California. Duh. You're just talking about that. So after Queen Wasp, Devilock, which is one of the a favorite by people. That's the the hairdos they have with the thing. I never had one of those, which is probably a good thing. And this this song has some amazing screams by Danzig. But after this comes Death Comes Ripping, which is one I can kind of I can almost hear like that would have been like something that was written around the time of Walk Among Us, or right out, And I think when I saw Sam Hain at Hannam Hall, I think they did Death Comes Ripping, this song, which I think is, one of the best songs on here. After this comes Green Hell, which is another, one of the more metallic songs on this album, which makes sense that, Metallica would have covered this on their Garage Days Revisited EP. And they did it, and I like that cover. And later on they did, what's the other one? Last Caress, which is, whatever. It's that song's got some, a lot of these songs have questionable lyrics, especially on this record. There's when you finally hear what some of these lyrics are, not questionable, just beyond like sort of the kitschy comic book sci-fi stuff that and weird like conspiracy stuff he was writing early on, pre Walk Among Us even, but then the Walk Among Us record is, that's sort of that's the first time you see that logo, I think, right? And so yeah, I mean that was on all those flyers too. So, but I think that might have been the first time that was used on a record. But that record essentially, when you look at that record, you think of 60s and 50s horror movies. When you look at this record, you think of fucking Satan, with all these things on it. And but Metallica doing Green Hell definitely helped, sell some Misfits records and shirts, I'm sure. It definitely pushed them into another level. You have, stuff you could now buy at like the mall and stuff like that. Good for them. The next song is Wolf's Blood, which opens side 2, which to me is like pure Motorhead and Venom. It's one of my favorite songs on here. And it's another one of those of them, not really trying to hide their metal influence. It's just, and I think it's a weird, it's a great opener for side 2. And also this, this version of this, even though it has, Wolf's Blood on the cover, I never listened to it like in that order. I listened to it like you would. Earth AD side first, boom, right over to the other one, Wolf's Blood. This is one of those records too. Don't get too comfortable because you got to get up in like 7 minutes to flip it over. When I first started trying to lose weight a few years ago, one of the things I did was I listened to a bunch of 7-inches so I could just like keep getting up and getting my steps in. It was great. I got 7 steps each time I got up. But yeah, so that was a thing. But anyway, let's get back to the Misfits here. I love this as the opener. Like I said, but then it's got that weird ending where he's, he does a lot of these songs on here. It sounds like he's like eating mashed potatoes while he's doing the vocal. And some people claim he says, "Know why you're dead." But I've read a lot of these lyrics online, and I think a lot of them are ones that people just came up with, because a lot of them make no sense. Demonomania, the fastest song here, is the next one. That's like the best name for the song on here, too. That almost could have been the first song on here. It's like 45 seconds long. You're in, boom, and then you're out. Blood Feast, on most of my days, is probably my favorite song on here. It's a slow and bouncy, but very catchy song. And I can kind of hear the early band in this. And if I was one of those people that was able to sort of get stuff out of my brain, if I was better at explaining stuff or connecting the dots on a lot of stuff, I feel like I could get from Cough Cool to this song in a very short period of time. If you're a Misfits fan, just think about that. These two songs, just how they are, how they're written. I think they're similar in some ways. And this one also has one of those muffled, like, I think it's just in the right channel, and it's just like a very muffled backing vocal that's sort of singing this song along with, it's Danzig, which I think is most of these songs are just like tons of track. It almost sounds like dozens of tracks of him doing vocals. But on this one, there's just this one really muffled one in the right channel. And if you listen to this on headphones, it's creepy. So after that, the core Earth AD album closes with Hellhound. It's a weird closer to the record. I think Blood Feast almost could have been a better closer to this record. But hey, I don't make the rules or sequence Misfits records. But when you listen to this one, or if you're listening to this on streaming, then you get hit with Die Die My Darling after this. Which is a nice change of place. It's from a different record. It sounds off, but sometimes it almost works as a palate cleanser and a reminder of what most of the Misfits music sounds like. And We Bite actually rules and kind of fits in with what they're doing here. I'm not sure if that was recorded at the same sessions as this or when that was recorded, but it also has that really catchy chorus, which makes me think that that's why it was left. If it was part of these recordings, I don't think it was actually. Maybe it was. It doesn't. Maybe it was too catchy for this record, and they want to leave because there's nothing really catchy on here. I mean, there is, in a sort of way. And if you when you listen to this in the scheme of their whole catalog, it does make sense, some of it. But like I said, trying to get from Cough Cool, but, trying to get from, Hybrid Moments to, Demonomania. I don't know. There's a lot of different routes you can go there. You know what I'm saying? But then there's the other version where they, ends side 2 after Death Comes Ripping. Is that what it is? They put Mommy, Can I Go and Kill Tonight, the studio version of that. And that's another one I think is questionable because it's fast, so it sort of fits on here. And I think, it was recorded in this session because Jerry only just mentioned it in this. So I don't know why they didn't include that on here, but maybe, again, like, it is one of those sort of old school Misfit songs, and then ended up on, Walk Among Us, the live version. But it doesn't, maybe it was too catchy, an old school Misfits for them for this. They wanted this, like, very concise 9-song record. But, I think ending it, with Hellhound, it's kind of an abrupt ending for this record. But yeah, this is, one of these bands that comes up a lot on this podcast, and that were, this is another one of these bands I feel like, when it comes up in here, it's kind of hard to, like, this is my favorite. What I'm trying to say is, let me slow it down here. Take it easy. We get tea tonight, just tea. We're just trying to get in and out of here. But this Misfits record is my favorite Misfits record, but also Walk Among Us is. And, I talk about this band and a lot of bands on this podcast where I think a lot of times when an artist reinvents themselves, it's kind of hard to then say this is my favorite thing by them, because, a lot of times it's so far from what it was when they started that it's, it's kind of hard to pick. So I think of these of, like, there's so many different eras of the Misfits, and they really only have 2 albums, right? Earth AD and Walk Among Us, and then, a bunch of compilations and singles. But I think this record works because it's, really weird, and, it's sort of it's a cool ending to the Danzig era of the Misfits. I never really explored the stuff with the other singers, and but I think, they ended this era on a high note, and I don't think another record by these 4 guys would have had the same impact as this. I think they, it was great just putting this band together, this version of this band, well, the Robo, and just blasting this record out, and then quitting essentially. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this record and this era of the band? What's your favorite era of the Misfits? Let me know in the comments. And if you like what you are seeing here, please like and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these now that I am feeling a little better lately. So I'm hopefully going to get back into a more regular rotation, putting videos out. So thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.